The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us today. In a moment I'll pass you over to Peter and Mark. The webinar we're aiming to be 30 to 40 minutes with Q&A. If you've got any questions, please do add them to the chat box and we'll cover them throughout. Thanks, and I'll now pass you over to Peter and Mark.
Thank you very much, Kate. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Newman. I'm a senior trainer with the Telecoms and Tech Academy. I've been in the telecoms business for about 25, 30 years. And what I really enjoy is looking at telecoms operator business models and future strategies. I've been training with the Academy for the last 3 years. I've also had some leadership roles in research businesses. So Peter, do you want to give us just a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Pete Greaves here. So a bit like Mark, with very similar backgrounds. I've been in telecoms not quite as long, about 20 years now as a trainer on a range of areas, from the pure technologies we find in networks through to operator strategy, sales methodology and sales training, support training, and also helping operators understand the sort of strategic change and trends in the business.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So in terms of the slides that we'll be showing you, we will give you copies of those slides and the recording. You'll be receiving an email after the event within the next day or two. As Kate mentioned, if you have any questions for us, then please use the chat box and we'll pick them up. So do you want to advance the next slide, Peter?
There you go.
So thank you very much indeed for sending us in your questions. So the 10 topics that we've chosen are all based on the questions that you sent in. They all fit within this broad category called digital transformation. And it's a term which has become, dare I say it, a little bit overused. But I think when we start thinking about driving commercial performance, it actually gives us a very useful framework for thinking about what you as a telecoms operator can do in the short to medium term. I think this term, digital transformation, it's largely three things. It's about operational efficiency, which is using automation, using new digital architectures, using new processes, using new organizational structures to drive efficiencies, to bring about cost savings. Secondly, it's about new revenues, and new revenues can be from existing customers with existing services, but it can also be from new business models, new types of revenue streams, which may be looking sort of 2, 3, 4 years ahead. But I think we do know that what is very much here and now is, for example, IoT, which is something I think on most operators' minds. And thirdly, I think it's around improved customer experience. And I think what is fascinating, just tracking this industry in recent years, is that in many ways, customer experience has become a strategy in itself. Indeed, I know many operator groups who will tell me that they believe that until they get customer experience right, it's pretty hard to start looking at new business models, new services. So we'll now move into the 10 themes that you sent us. Peter, anything to add, or should we dive straight in?
No, I mean, it's just the experience, customer experience side of things. That the really interesting thing, quite a lot of that's being driven by the kind of internet players and the customer experience we as consumers get on those sites. And interesting talking to operators how they bring some of that into their customer service and web portal design, product delivery. So it's being driven by lots of factors in the marketplace.
Yeah. Okay. Should we move next slide?
Yeah, sure.
So cloud is a topic which is a reality for everybody, I believe, who will be working within a telecoms operator. And what this slide is endeavoring to show is that cloud sits anywhere and everywhere. So if you're in the network division, you're looking at your future evolution, you're thinking about virtualizing and cloudifying different parts of the network. Progress has been stuttering, I would say. So the key terms here are SDN and NFV. We're at the fairly early stages of that journey towards virtualization of the network. From what we see, operators are virtualizing a small number of functions, but the big wholesale shift towards a cloud native platform, I think we're still waiting for. And I think there's some interesting dynamics between the operators and the technology suppliers who don't necessarily want to move to more of an open system. Then we shift into IT and operations, and often we know that as BSS and OSS. And there, I think there is certainly pressure to adopt cloud-based solutions. A number of vendors out there are rapidly shifting their software capabilities into the cloud. I think what needs to be said here is that you need to have a multi-speed approach when you start thinking about cloud for BSS OSS. If you're talking about a core BSS stack, that's pretty hard to migrate into the cloud in the short term. If however you're talking about elements of IT which are closer to the customer experience dimension, you can start to embrace some of those new technologies pretty soon, pretty quickly. I think the other thing to be said about cloud in IT is that it can be very useful to adopt cloud to make your IT more agile. And I think that lack of agility is a major problem that telcos have had in shifting their IT operations. Then we start to think about the lines of business. And I think particularly the enterprise line of business, cloud is a particularly active discussion. A lot of operators are moving some of their core products, be it communication services. We're shifting into unified communications. A lot of those are shifting into the cloud. But I think we're also seeing operators endeavoring to position themselves alongside, maybe in partnership with some of the large cloud providers, which might either be from a software background, such as a Microsoft, or some of the cloud native players, such as Amazon Web Services or Google. I think when we think about cloud from a consumer perspective, it's less clear where telcos are playing in that space, because I think telcos have been squeezed out of the consumer services space, because in all probability, as a consumer, you'll be getting your services from the over-the-top players. Then I think when we think about cloud in other parts of the business, wherever you go in the business, in HR and finance and payroll, there's a whole host of new applications and services which are cloud-based and cloud-enabled. Now, I think one of the overall challenges for operators is often knowing what are the rules and the guidelines about how to adopt cloud. And I think there are issues around privacy. In some countries, you simply will not be allowed to use public cloud services because you probably don't have a public cloud capability within your country, so you're thinking about private cloud. So I think the challenges here are ones around privacy issues, and I think a degree of comfort about moving away from on-premise solutions to cloud-based solutions. Peter, anything to comment on there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly from the enterprise space, I think if you went back 5 years or maybe a little bit longer than that, there was still very much a kind of we've always had an on-premise solution, and that brings us levels of security and control that we just can't get in the cloud. And I think that mindset's changed dramatically in both private and public sector, and certainly a lot of the various regions I've been in. But you've still got that mix of different types of clouds. You mentioned public, private, and then a lot of the bigger enterprise look at a kind of hybrid as well, where they might move or migrate some services into the cloud and some remain on premise. So it's a really dynamic environment for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So the next slide, I think it gives you an indication. If you want to advance the slides, Peter.
Yeah, done so.
Yeah, that's great. So this is a slide from Ovum, which is a research firm, which is part of the same group as Telecoms and Tech Academy. And Ovum tracks acquisitions by telecoms operators broadly across the spectrum of cloud and cloud-based services. So this shows the number of acquisitions by operators globally by year from 2010 all through to 2017. And it's a particularly active space. So I think telcos do not necessarily have a cloud culture. So in many cases, they're needing to make acquisitions to adopt the right people with the right skills and the right cultures. And I think if we look at the type of companies they're acquiring, it's a whole range of different types of companies providing some providing horizontal solutions, some providing vertical solutions in areas such as security or healthcare or financial services. And the big question when you as a telco think about acquiring in the cloud spaces, the extent to which you integrate into your core. And this business about how to integrate third-party companies is a major challenge for an operator, because on the one hand, you want to integrate a business so it can benefit from other capabilities within the enterprise. But on the other hand, if you integrate too quickly, you might end up losing that dynamism and that culture that's appealed to you in the first place. So, Peter, any thoughts there, or should we move on?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add to that is we've had a couple of examples here in the UK, for example, of one of the large networks acquiring a large data center capability through the acquisition of another business, and that brings a range of extra products and services and capabilities. But as you said, it's that integration of back-end systems like provisioning systems, billing platforms, processes that often proves the really tricky part. So the acquisition almost is the easy bit, and then the integration of those businesses is in some cases very, very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Next slide, Peter.
Yeah.
So insourcing, and this is a bit of a naughty wordplay by me, taking back control. So if we look at the history of telecoms from the last 20 years, it's been one of outsourcing major technology capabilities to third-party companies, either on the network side or the IT side, and that served the industry pretty well all the time that revenues were growing. And outsourcing in many ways allowed telcos to focus on other parts of their business. But there's a realization that if you, as a telco, really want to control your destiny in terms of the products and services that you offer, if we're talking about digital products and services, you really need to have greater control of where your core technologies are taking you. And so we do see a number of operators now looking to insource skills, and it's insourcing skills to enable them to digitize different processes, different projects, different services, and so this recruitment in areas such as agile, such as data analytics, such as sort of core architectures. This is something that's happening apace in the larger operator groups. So if you look at an AT&T, or in this case a Telstra or a BT, they're bringing in teams of software experts, and that introduces an interesting dynamic in terms of how they work with their third-party suppliers. And I think what we're seeing is a shift towards more of a co-creation, more of a partnership with the third-party suppliers, rather than an outsourcing-based approach. I think coupled with that, we're seeing great interest in open source technologies. I think particularly when we start thinking about the network, there are some industry groups now who are looking to build new capabilities using open source. I think one of the interesting discussions here is, do you as an operator feel that you have the capability to do that? So it's something we're certainly seeing the large operators doing, often in partnership with the vendors. If you're a medium-sized or small operator, you might well decide that's actually, for the time being, beyond your capabilities. Peter, anything you'd like to bring in there?
I was just going to say, Mark, I don't know if you've noticed as well. So a couple of things. I've seen quite a few operators. If I classify skill set as kind of ISP skills, so the kind of sort of skills you'd find in a service provider or internet player, bringing those into the business. But there are some areas where the skill set or the pool of people just isn't big enough. So security is a really good example of that, I think, where the really top-notch security people, there just aren't enough in the industry. So sometimes, whilst you might want to insource in the security space, for example, it may well be that that's quite a challenging thing to do, and you're almost led with no other option but to partner with specialists as well. So I think it's kind of a mix of those two things.
And I think often in some of the hot new areas around analytics and AI, you're competing with the Googles and Facebooks and Amazons. And if you're a smart 25-year-old, where do you want to develop your career in AI? Would you choose a telco, or would you choose a digital service provider? So telcos really need to work out, how much they pay these people, what sort of career path they can offer.
And also whether they have the right kind of almost like the kind of organizational DNA, whether they're as fleet of foot and as risk, not so risk averse and as dynamic as some of these internet players. And traditionally, that's not necessarily the DNA we've seen in mobile and fixed operators.
No, absolutely. Okay, next slide, Peter.
Okay.
So, digital experiences. So, we mentioned that customer experience is a major drive for telcos generally, and a lot is said about moving towards an omni-channel capability. An omni-channel means being able to meet customer experience across a range of different online and offline channels. I think in practice, the move towards digital experiences is actually the key issue here. I think we're actually moving towards more digital experience than omni-channel experiences. And what I think is extraordinary about telecoms is, given that we are extremely technology-based industry, it's extraordinary how slow we've been in industry to push our commerce online. What percentage of people in your country buy their mobile phone service and communicate with their service provider if they have any issues, problems online? The answer is it's probably a pretty small proportion. And from what we can see, a number of operators are now looking at actually moving a lot of their offline business online. That will help them to save on some of their retail costs, which are pretty high in many cases. And I think when you start thinking about digital experiences, the reality is that you can give people a great digital experience. Now, the example I've given here is what's happened to the taxi business with Uber, and in many ways, when you have digital experiences, you can actually provide a far better experience than you had before. So in this example here, in many ways, when you look at Uber, it's managed to address those pain points around a local currencies, how you hail a taxi. And so I think when we think about telecoms digital experiences, what are the pain points and challenges we can help people address? So it might be a pain point around how you migrate your plan. Can you migrate the plan that you subscribe to dynamically in real time online? Can you make purchases of other goods and services from your service provider? Can you gift some credit maybe to a member of family? Maybe even can you switch service provider online? So I think we're now seeing operators realizing that they need to embrace these digital services and capabilities, because not only are they more operationally efficient, but actually you can deliver a much better level of customer service. Peter?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And you could add on to that also things like bringing in the sort of peer review type things that we're used to on the likes of Amazon and so on. And also maybe as well, I was just going to say, with the digital experience, maybe that also opens up the opportunities for different business models as well. So moving away, maybe not, from the traditional monthly pay plan and inclusive minutes and so on. So maybe other types of business models.
Yes, absolutely. Should we move on?
Yeah, sure. Next slide, show me.
So AI. So AI is, it's the big hot thing in digital now. I think one of the CEOs of, might have been Eric Schmidt, who said maybe a year or so ago, the last 10 years have been all about mobility. The next 10 years will be about AI. And every time that there's a new sort of Google announcement, new product development, it's probably going to be AI driven. So if you're a telco, you're thinking, well, how can we leverage AI? And so I think in terms of where we are with AI today, a number of operators introducing chatbots, for example, which are AI driven. I think we are seeing the early use of AI in the broader customer-centric solutions. So maybe, giving call center staff some capabilities so they can better understand their customers and they can sort of be more proactive in what they do with their customers. I think longer term it's going to be around network, but that's probably 4 or 5 years away. But one of the things I think is interesting, again, relating this back to driving commercial performance and what do you do in the short term around AI, is how do you structure yourselves around the AI opportunity? And if you have sort of two extreme cases, you can either try to centralize everything in one particular function, or you can take the view that you will let 1,000 flowers bloom, and you will let each different part of the business experiment with AI, try out different vendors, and then maybe you will audit all of that, and you'll find a way of bringing it together. So the example I've given here is Verizon, which I think has taken a hybrid approach, which I really like. So if we look at Verizon, they do have some different teams who are focused on AI. So there's, I think probably the main team is what they call DSCI, which is Data Science and Cognitive Intelligence data team. That works very closely with the customer experience teams. I believe the chief digital officer is part of that team. But then we also have a lot of AI in areas such as supply chain and analytics. How can you use AI to improve your logistics? And there's another team, Big Data and Artificial Intelligence Systems, which is looking at more customer-facing solutions, so embedding AI in services you give to your customers. Now, what Verizon has done, it's created a central organization which has representation from across the business called Verizon Data Enterprise Analytics. And its responsibility is around governance, data management, data warehousing, data lakes. And it's a cross-functional team. So they're attempting to have the best of both worlds, which is allowing different parts of the organization to experiment with AI, but at the same time, giving these people representation on a central team so they can work out how to avoid duplicating resource and how to grow their own internal capabilities. So Peter, I'm not sure how many CSPs you've come across who are very advanced in their AI. I guess it's still quite early days.
It is, and it's one of those things you probably have to kind of just be lucky and meet the right guy and the right team. But it's certainly, the back end systems, the customer experience of dialing into contact centers, those types of things. A lot of that can be improved by just how you manage your data and how you kind of
exactly. What I find fascinating about AI is when we look at digital experiences, it relies on analytics. And AI, it has to act on analytics. In many ways, what I like about AI is that operators have actually been struggling with their analytic strategies. And I think AI actually gives you a renewed reason for investing in analytics, because if you're going to build AI solutions, you have to have good, clean data behind it. You need to have good learning sets. So the two are as one. I think operators do have integrated AI and analytics teams.
I think you also need to just balance that with every now and again you do need a kind of a human touch on it, because sometimes AI can be very black and white in its decision making. And you might, from a customer service point of view, you might make a decision based on pure data, whereas a human might look at that and slightly change the decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Next slide, Peter.
Super.
So IoT. So if you were to ask 10 operators today, what is the next big hope for your business? I reckon 8 or 9 would say IoT. That probably has been the case for the last 5 years or so. But I think there's renewed interest in IoT because there's a number of new network capabilities that enable you to deliver IoT at much lower cost than has been the case. So the umbrella term for this is low-powered wireless access, LPWA. And within that, there's different technologies. So that there's some proprietary technologies such as Sigfox or Angenu. If you look at LTE-M, NB-IoT, these are basically sort of flavors of LTE. And I think the interesting thing about this is that many IoT applications only require a small amount of capacity on an irregular basis. So all the time that IoT was based on 2G, 3G, the cost of the SIM card was a major inhibitor. Now that's being overcome, so operators can look at solutions that might deliver only 10, 20, 30 cents a month of revenues. Whether or not it will convert to a major earner is a moot point. If we look globally today, telco IoT revenues are, I would say, about 1%, between 0.8 and 1% of total operator revenues. Some of the larger operator groups probably have, 1.5%, 2% of revenues. How long will it take for it to become a major earner? So this is some survey data from Heavy Reading. Half people saying within the next 5 years it will be more than 10% of revenues. My own feeling is that that's quite an ambitious target. I think what we're going to see is that the connectivity part of revenues could actually go down because of the shift towards LPWA technologies. The key for operators is working out where are your capabilities, where are you going to move outside of just connectivity business. So are you going to be moving into a platform-based business model, maybe connectivity management? Are you going to be diving into certain verticals? If you're going to go into a vertical, do you need to acquire? Now, if we look at players such as Vodafone, maybe Verizon's probably a better example. Verizon spent something like $5 billion becoming a global fleet telematics player. So I think to move into a vertical, even into a horizontal, you may well need to make major acquisitions. So yes, it's very exciting, but it's big and diverse and difficult. Peter, I'm sure you have some views on this.
Yeah, certainly the acquisition thing. You mentioned Vodafone with their acquisition of Cobra Automotive to really go into the automotive space, and I know they've got a huge amount of kind of projects on that. So there's this debate. Every operator I think I've been in, the IoT capability, everyone talks about it, but ultimately you've got to find out what the business model is going to be, what the use cases are going to be. Some verticals have amazing opportunities for IoT. But ultimately you might also look at it from an operator point of view. IoT propositions are great for other things as well as just pure revenue generation. They're great for customer entanglement. They're great for long-term customer value because many IoT contracts or deals, the deal length is much, much longer than we'd find in a pure mobile or fixed line play. So it's part of that mix, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Next slide,
Peter.
Yeah, showing.
So bundling and unbundling. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with bundling, and it's been, certainly from a European perspective, it's probably been the major commercial theme for the last 4 to 5 years. So we're seeing all the large operator groups intending to become balanced across fixed and mobile, more balanced across consumer and enterprise, and moving into the TV space as well. The reason it's pretty clear, it's because if you have bundled customers, they're more loyal than if you have single play customers. So many operators, we see that if we take, for example, the mobile business, a mobile subscription that's part of a quad play bundle, there's probably a churn on that of significantly less than 10%, so maybe 5% to 10%. If that customer is just subscribing to mobile, the churn is probably 20% plus. So clearly bundling has been very attractive, and it's been a key strategy for the major operator groups, the likes of Orange, Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom. Now, my question is whether there's a risk that we move from bundling to unbundling. And I think there's two drivers here that every operator needs to be aware of in the short and medium term. And that is, when we think about the TV business, pay TV has proved a pretty good business for many operators. A lot of them are now generating 5-10% of revenues from pay TV. However, the pay TV business is being seriously challenged by what we call over-the-top players, by players such as Netflix. So, is the pay TV business, what are the prospects in the medium to long term for the pay TV business? It's challenged, and there will be many markets where people decide to migrate from pay TV onto an OTT-based service. So that's my number one. My number two is a more interesting one, which is that as we move from LTE into Gigabit LTE, and more of that in a minute, and as we move into 5G, is there not a risk that some people in areas where there's good coverage may decide to cut the cord and use 5G? And I think we talk about 5G being an opportunity, which it absolutely is, but there is an opportunity, I think, for mobile operators who are just mobile, to use 5G to compete with the converged operator groups. So I think it's possible that as we look in the short to medium term, we're going to be talking about both bundling and bundling. So it's not just going towards bundling. I think there may well be some unbundling once you have bundled. I think every operator needs to be aware of that, needs to be constantly looking at and refining their converged strategies, their multi-play strategies. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, there's such a hot topic. I mean, it just in the news this week, clearly, I'm sure most of you will have seen the acquisition yesterday, or the announcement yesterday, for Vodafone, 18.4 billion euros acquiring parts of the Liberty Global business for the delivery of cable TV. And then there's just news here in the UK this morning from our incumbent operator, BT, about their performance, but a lot of the conversation was around the amount of money they have to spend for rights access to content. So there's two things. There's the delivery mechanism, the actual network. So we're seeing acquisitions of those. But if you are bundling TV, TV is often seen as the anchor, and that is strengthened by having some kind of exclusive access to content, and that's often to do with sports programming and often to do with football, actually. So it is a really interesting one. And as you said, Netflix have gone from a business that just pushed out other people's content to being one of the best content creators there are in that space now. So in about 3 years, so it's amazing.
And you touched on sports and sports rights. In reality, when we're talking about pay TV, we're talking about football. And I think, as and when the likes of Amazon start to acquire football rights, then the pay TV business should be getting very, very nervous.
Yeah.
So the next slide is, so we could do with spending half an hour on this, but we don't have half an hour, so we'll go through it quickly. So when we think of digital and becoming more digital, one of the things we're talking about is adopting new business models. And a platform business model is one whereby the company, and we're talking about telcos here, but it's easy to think of players such as, I don't know, an Uber or Booking.com or even Amazon. So in a platform-based business, you have both producers producing goods and services, and they're being the light blue, and you have the consumers who are consuming the services. And the platform play involves both working with the producers and the consumers. And you have something called the network effect, whereby you drive the growth of the business by stimulating both the producers and the consumers. So in the Uber model, Uber needs to both drive the take-up of Uber drivers and drivers of, and it needs to stimulate the market for using Uber. So the reason I'm bringing this into discussion is that most operators now are trying to figure out what is platform, what can we do, and I think there's very different platform business models that you can be taking. Now, I see two extremes of this. So on the one extreme, I see a telco doing what Amazon Web Services has done, or what I should say Amazon did, which is turning itself inside out and exposing some of its key capabilities around areas such as billing and charging, could even be connectivity, it could be access to voice services, and allowing third-party companies to access those services on a wholesale basis. Operators make money on a wholesale basis, and operators might also make money by taking some sort of revenue share in the services delivered to end users with their capabilities embedded in those third-party services. But that's one extreme. That's not really happening yet. That's probably medium to long term. I think in the shorter term, when we talk about areas such as IoT, operators are looking to expand into IoT using a platform-based business. Now, why are they doing that? Well, it's because if you are a telco, it enables you to take a role in the market without having to invest in specific vertical or horizontal solutions. All you're doing is using your capability to bring on board partners that offer services through your platform and want to use your platform because of capabilities you have around billing or connectivity to reach their end users. So it's a much lower risk strategy for moving into a marketplace. The key issue here is whether telcos have the skills and the attractiveness from both the consumer and the producer's perspective to build compelling platforms in IoT. So it's quite a complex, difficult discussion, but we are seeing the word platform a lot. And I think it's important that telcos, as I say, they're going to be driving their commercial performance, need to be clear about what they're doing here. Peter, I'm sure you come across the term platform a lot. I don't know if you find like me, which is that people are never quite clear what it is and what it means.
Yeah, there's all these as a service, and what that's just one of them for sure. And I think you kind of touched on it a bit. It's a mindset change as well from an operator. There's quite a lot of internal changes needed to start opening up your network like that. But the opportunities are there. We've seen them from other players. So.
Okay, thanks. Should we move on?
Yep. Final slide showing.
Yep. So Gigabit LTE. So so this evolution from LTE to 5G is interesting. And while 5G captures a lot of the headlines and the excitement and the interest in the industry, if you go to Mobile World Congress, it's all about 5G. But actually, in the shorter term, there's something very exciting taking place, which is enhancements to basic LTE, enhancements such as carrier aggregation, enhancements such as 4x4 MIMO, 256 QAM, and these enhancements are taking us towards an era of Gigabit LTE. And I thought it was interesting. I picked up some of the network numbers from the Global Supply Association database. So we look at some of the speeds being offered by operators now that have launched Gigabit LTE. And you can already see Gigabit LTE taking LTE to speeds that you would normally associate with the fixed broadband. Now, this is very much a short to medium term proposition for you as an operator. The question is going to be, how are you going to monetize those improved speeds? I think there's an active discussion now around unlimited data pricing as well. So with Gigabit LTE, you will be giving your customers fantastic utility for their smartphone services. How will you monetize that? What will your pricing strategy be? Will you move towards an unlimited data pricing or pseudo unlimited data pricing? Will you increase your revenues from LTE? And so this is a great opportunity. It's there or just around the corner, but I think it's the pricing issue that's going to be the real challenge here. Peter, have you seen many operators who are talking about this or deploying?
What about the unlimited data bundle? They often talk about it. It's quite a scary proposition, but I can't see it not being the case with it sometime within the not so distant future. I think with fixed line connections are unlimited in most markets already. But then you kind of just start being more and more of a bit pipe if you're not careful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it seems to me operators who have launched unlimited data pricing, they do get a short-term hike in their revenues because you can charge a bit of a premium for it. The issue is probably more medium to long-term, which is once you've gone unlimited, what do you do next? Because you can't really upsell. But I think unlimited data pricing it's fantastic customer experience because you stop worrying about your data. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's here to stay. Should we move on?
Yeah, sure. Slide.
So customer journey. So I think this is our last slide. So within most operators now, there's a shift towards making processes, business decisions, technology decisions based around customer journeys. There's a great video I saw recently, actually, which is Steve Jobs being asked in the room. This was several years ago about Apple's support for Java, and he was being heckled from the room. And he said then, everything that you do in terms of technology needs to start with the customer experience and work back into the organization. So I think we are seeing operators starting to adopt a stronger customer journey, customer centricity to what they're doing. And this is actually some data from the TM Forum. They did a large operator survey. And it's showing where are operators today in terms of deploying these initiatives to improve customer engagement. And they're across a whole range of areas. And you can see that most operators are either planning or implementing. A number are still considering, but we are seeing this evolution towards customer-based journeys, digital experiences, and I do think that it comes back in many ways to one of the first slides we have around customer experience, which is that once you actually start to leverage these capabilities and you become more digital in your DNA, then you're in a position to start really changing the dynamics of your relationship with your customers. So it's quite a difficult slide to take in, and maybe in your own time, it's actually worth looking at some of those numbers, some of those different initiatives around your areas such as analytics, AI, chatbots, mobile app centricity. Peter, I'm not sure there's anything there you want to.
No, nothing to add for me. That was nice and succinct. Yeah.
Okay. So let's. So I think so. There are our 10 pointers. I say that they come to you from the questions you sent in to us. So you can just move on to the next slide, Peter. So Peter and I. This is our take. Okay. So our takeaways are. So apologies. So. Customer experience in itself can be seen as being a strategy. You have to improve customer experience before you can start moving to new business models. Cloud is a given. You need to move to cloud at multi-speeds. IoT is an opportunity, but be realistic about what you can do. Digital experiences, we're getting there, but I think some of the internal cultural capabilities are a challenge. Bundling, moving into unbundling as well as bundling. Platform business models. A number of operators are already talking about what platform business models are. We'll see a number adopting platform business models. They look at areas such as IoT, and Gigabit LTE is something which is here and now for many operators, and it's probably the biggest single short-term opportunity. So that's all from me. Peter, anything broadly you'd like to add across everything we've covered today?
I don't think so. I think there's no single kind of answer to this. There's no magic bullet.
No.
It can impact so many different parts of the business, and I think it's just something that you kind of have to take it on a kind of case by case basis, but understand that a lot of it is being driven by the customer, by our experiences we see in other services that we use, often internet-based services, and we want those from our operators.
Yeah, thank you. So if we just shift on to the next slide.
Yep.
So Peter and I spend a lot of our time crisscrossing the world and delivering training either in public courses or in customized courses. We always endeavor in those courses to tailor them to what you particularly need. As you probably worked out in this webinar, we do enjoy talking and sharing our knowledge with you. So if you are interested in following up with us, then contact Helen Robinson. Her email and phone number at the bottom here, and we look forward to meeting you all. Now I think we've been through some of the questions that came in. You've already been through those, Peter. So I think we're probably okay, aren't we, in terms of taking questions? I think we've probably covered most of the areas we wanted to.
If anyone's got any final things, they can stick them in the chat box at the bottom. It's been quite quiet during the session, but I've been bringing some things in. So, but if
okay, great. Alternatively, as I say, you have Helen's email address, so you can put a question to Peter or I through Helen. Kate, do you want to wrap up?
Yes, thanks, Mark. So we have actually run a bit over, but as Peter said, please do add to the chat box or email those across the questions, and we can answer them afterwards. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We'll be sending a copy of the recording along with the slides tomorrow. You can read more about the programs that we offer at telecomsacademy.com. And as Peter and Mark mentioned, the Driving Commercial Performance program, the details are on the screen now. Thanks, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks
everybody. Have a great day.